Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's masterclass. My name is Erin Melvin, and I'll be the moderator for today's session. If you are a regular attendee of our sessions, you might be surprised to hear my voice as the moderator for today's session, and that's because I'm very pleased to present our guest speaker today, Leah Chang. Leah Chang is an educational technologist and an instructional designer, and she has over 16 years of experience working with organizations to develop online and classroom learning. As a consultant, she specializes in learning management system configuration and workflow, systems learning, and instructional design. I met Leah about 4 years ago when she was working as an administrator for Totara Learn, and we developed a friendship over our shared geekiness for learning technologies and attending meetups. Today, Leah brings her extensive experience to share essential tips on LMS administration and maintenance. We'll look at the importance of LMS ownership and governance, course delivery strategy, and discuss some examples of workflows to document for ongoing sustainability. Today's session will be 30 minutes long as usual, so we may not have time for all of your questions. However, we always encourage you to ask them through the question box, because either I'll try and answer during the session or we'll connect with you offline after our session. Finally, please feel free to pick up both the slides and a handout for today's presentation in the GoToWebinar control panel. There's a lot of great information in there, and we'll also send them out to you with the follow-up emails. And with that, I'm happy to hand the mic over to Leah for today's session.
Thanks, Erin. It's really exciting to be here today and talk about one of my favorite subjects. So be prepared to hear me get very excited about this. But my job in the next 20 or so minutes is to make LMS administration sexy. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means. And as Erin explained, I had the pleasure and the honor of working with her when we set up our own Totara instance at a company I was working with. I've learned a lot since then, and I'd like to share a little bit about my past with you. But back in the day when I was a former educator and just getting into corporate learning, I would not touch the LMS with a 39.5-foot pole. There's no way you could get me in there. Even when I was managing the Learning Center team, I tried as little as possible to use our LMS. And, you know, I've really learned that that was a mistake. At the time, it was a pretty cryptic, sort of old school, very corporate, way too robust system for what the organization needed at the time. And nobody wanted to use it. Well, what I realized today is that LMS administration can be pretty exciting, and I get really jazzed about it. So today I'm going to talk about why LMS administration is so important and why it's important to keep it sexy for your organization, for your employees, but also for you as a business. I'll give you 7 very concrete tips to keep it real, keep it sexy, or maybe if you've had it for a while, get your sexy back. And I'm going to leave you with some takeaways today because who doesn't love takeaways? So we always want to come away with something very concrete and actionable after a webinar. So here's what I mean by sexy. I'm going to talk a bit about the chemistry, that wonderful magic that happens when the right employees, those people who are really excellent at doing LMS administration or any systems or database administration, come together with the right employers or the right organizations. And here's what that chemistry or that orgasmic symbiosis looks like. It's when employees who love spreadsheets or get jazzed about up-to-date databases, or who get really excited and swoon when they see beautiful, clean naming conventions and folder and file management. You know who I'm talking about, right? I love to be organized, and these kind of things make me feel satisfied as an employee. I like to see that we have a system that's working, that we have process, and I'm not super rigid about these things, but you know, these are the type of people who make an LMS or any system work well. And when you pair those with the employers who know that LMS administration is important work, who value it and who invest in their employees, they know that the LMS is a make or break tool, either to get their product out there or to set up the stage appropriately for their corporate training or corporate culture. So the LMS is a big investment, And businesses that invest in their administrators of that system are really smart. So that's where the magic happens, and that's what I mean by sexy. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in detail today. And the reason it's important to keep LMS administration sexy as a topic is because we all need to have LMS administrators. If you have an LMS, you need somebody to manage it, to work on it, to troubleshoot for users, all those kinds of things. And the problem is traditionally that organizations have seen that type of role as very junior, as menial tasks, not important or strategic in any way. And that's actually wrong. The problem is that it's hard to retain good LMS administrators. So if you have an LMS and you need LMS administrators, how can you attract those exciting employees who get turned on by spreadsheets and who just get super jazzed about database management? You want to attract them and retain them. And so in the words of Dan Savage, you want to be GGG. So with any good relationship, you should be good to your partner, giving, and game. So as you can see today, we're going to really push this analogy of the intimate, magical relationship. And I hope you're not offended by my jokes on sexual innuendo, but as with any learning, analogy helps us really connect to a topic. So I'm going to use those principles of neuroscience and sort of pepper them in today. On that note, I'd like to talk about what's hot right now. And data and analytics are hot in the business world. It's important to know your business intelligence and to inform your decisions based on hard data. So this is an opportunity with an LMS to get into those sort of realms of discussion and dialogue with some qualitative and quantitative data. And it's also an opportunity, especially for women right now, to get into the fields of technology. Analytics and working in learning management systems is a great way for women to get more involved in the tech world. And those are hot things right now. So if you can attract the right type of employees, you're going to keep them longer and you're ultimately going to have a better LMS team. A couple of other tips before we get into the good stuff is that getting intimate with your learning management system is good for your health, for your business health, your enterprise health. A lot of organizations buy a really fancy LMS, which is great, but they only use maybe 20% of the functionality. So, get to know it, spend some time. And finally, you want to spend more time on the things that make better sense, spending time on the actual learning content, building relationships with people. You want to make your time in the LMS count. So you don't want to overdo it. You want to keep it simple, keep it lean and mean, and that will definitely keep your LMS admin sexy. So let's do a quick poll. I'd like to know a little bit more about how your employees or you, if you're an LMS administrator, spend time. So I'll get Erin to launch that. And I'm curious how much time you spend on learning management system tasks. So here are a couple of examples. It could just be troubleshooting or updating user profiles or publishing or maybe gathering reports. So how much of your job description officially do you spend on these tasks? Is it 25, 50, 75%, or maybe it's 100%? So I'll give you a few more seconds to vote. And I'm really curious to see what we've got. When I was working in learning management systems, it was very common for us to do it just off the side of our desk. It wasn't really part of our official functions, and I found that really challenging as an employee. Some of the organizations I work with today, who are my clients, have a lot more success. And I'm going to show the poll results. Erin's just going to help me here. Here we go. We're all curious about the poll results. There we go. Okay. Wow. So 21%, less than 25%. Okay, this is interesting. So it's pretty even across the board. I'm excited to see that almost 30% have full-time positions in LMS administration. That's exciting. I hope that you feel valued. I hope you get a seat at the strategic discussions and tables at your place, because you have a really important job. And for those of you that work on it less than 25%, I'm curious to know more about how you've shared those roles and responsibilities, because that can also set you up for challenges or success, depending on how you've you've divvied out the work. So we'll talk about that in 2 seconds. I'm going to give you 7 concrete tips right now. And the first one is about just that. So my first tip is make sure you're accurately measuring the time your LMS administrators spend on LMS admin tasks. It sounds kind of silly, but if we go back to our analogy of a sexual sort of chemistry, it takes some time to get to know somebody, right? Or in this case, administer a system. So make sure if you're an employer, you're advocating or rewarding and recognizing the time it takes for your team to do every day or monthly or regular tasks in the LMS. If you are an LMS administrator, make sure you're advocating for yourself. Make sure it's in your job description. Make sure your performance review reflects that, and be sure to share your successes with your team too. If you are an HR person or you're looking to hire an LMS administrator, make sure you make that job description seductive. Nobody wants to go into a job where they can see that their work isn't going to be valued or where they won't really have an important place. It's much more than a coordinator's role. It can be quite strategic, and you can get really creative too. You want someone who's going to be good, and you want to be able to retain them. So make sure that you're attracting the right candidates. Track and measure time spent. I always find it's really healthy to pair your LMS administration with some sort of project management or tracking tool. And that way you can actually show the data like, hey, I'm spending 35% of this, but it's not part of my job description. And remember, LMS admin can be really creative sometimes too. So all that time that you're spending doing some sort of troubleshooting, it takes a lot of energy. And sometimes the most creative people are the best at it. And finally, some people find, being the LMS help desk or support person can be a bit tricky. So make sure you share the love there. Spread that around. It's good idea to get multiple people on your team with that experience. So that's tip number 1. All right, tip number 2, this is something that I believe I coined. I'm not entirely sure, but I like to talk about the administrative experience. It's not something I've heard of a lot, but everyone talks about the user experience and user interface and how important that is, and that's great. We definitely want to consider users when we are working on a system. But what about the administrators? Building a system, configuring it, or even selecting the type of vendor that you're going to go with for that administrator experience is just as important as user experience and user interface. So think of it as AXAI. But I'll give you a few examples. If you have a group of administrators who have very little experience with the learning management system, you want to keep that in mind when you're picking the right one, or maybe if you're migrating to a different one. You don't want to go with something super complicated in the back end. You want an interface and usability that would be easy for your team, given their perhaps lack of experience. Or if you have a team that's very experienced, you can go a little bit more robust. So I'd like you to leave with this tip, which is KISS. Everyone knows that acronym. Keep it simple, silly, or keep it simple, stupid. But in keeping with our theme, I thought KISS would be a good way to remember that to build out that admin use case and those personas is just as important to build out the user experience and use case, because administrators are users too. All right, tip number 3. This one seems super obvious, but make sure you designate clear ownership of the LMS. And in large organizations, this can sometimes get a bit tricky, but somebody or some department or some group needs to adopt the LMS as their baby. I try to talk a little bit about adopting a pet when I talk about an LMS or any sort of IT system. You spend a lot of time, money, and energy, and you get all excited when you first buy it, you first acquire it, and then you just forget about it. And as we know with databases or other systems, if you neglect it, things can spiral out of control. And again, going back to that business model, sometimes this is a make or break thing, especially if you're working in the realms of safety or compliance. You definitely don't want to lose control of your LMS. So make sure that you have clear ownership, because somebody's going to champion the LMS. They'll make sure that you're sitting at the table for big discussions or for those resourcing issues. That the owner of the LMS is going to make sure that you're sharing knowledge and responsibilities in a fair and transparent way. And you're not alone. There's tons of tools out there to help. I found this book by Katrina Marie Baker called LMS Success. A super useful tool with teams who own an LMS or maybe are new to that whole administrative hierarchy of LMS ownership and governance. And this is a great book with lots of worksheets to work through. So that's tip number 3. All right, tip number 4. You definitely want to build the right admin team. And again, this seems really simple, but in keeping with our theme, I'm going to say something a little racy here, but size and form actually do matter when it comes to LMS administration. And that's because it's that classic, too many cooks in the kitchen or too few people working on something is never a good idea. So you want to have a balance. And I'd like you to think of the group of 3, or a threesome in this case. So I'd recommend to have a clear owner or champion of the LMS and 2 other administrators. That is a very typical, very successful model of LMS admin team. You might have 3 maximum administrators, but definitely you want to outline clear roles and responsibilities. You want to sort of map out where do people's domains intersect, and where are they different. And this keeps everybody happy. So again, numbers, size, form, they matter. And number 5, hopefully you're in the stage where things are working. You've got a team, you've recruited the right people, people are jazzed about the LMS, and you know what, hey, things are working, so keep it up. Get to know what works, and this is a great way to think about relationships too. But when you get to know somebody or you get to know a system, if it's working, keep doing it. Do more of that. So here are some tips for your team that might be a bit more established. You want to use data to inform your publishing strategy. And what I call publishing strategy is anything from workflow or templates or even course verbiage and how you actually make a course happen and push it out to go live. So for example, I like to use course creation templates. I might, makes things a lot easier when you're publishing a course and you're working with subject matter experts and then you're asking them to describe, like, okay, what is this course about? These are the elements I need to be able to publish this course. It's really helpful to have publishing checklists. And also, if you have the ability, I highly recommend doing a course publishing style guide just for your admin team. So just like a marketing team would have a style guide or branding guide, you can do the same for your learning management system. And it kind of ties in with the checklist, but that's a great way to keep your standards consistent, keep your team lean and mean and efficient, and also make sure you've got key elements like branding and that kind of thing in there. So that's tip number 5. I've got a couple more tips for you. This one, again, seems obvious, but plan ahead for business continuity. As with relationships, people leave sometimes, c'est la vie. And so you don't want to be completely brokenhearted if somebody leaves your admin team. Don't be blindsided by a breakup. And the way to do this, to prepare in advance, because people will come and go, is spend the time to always document your workflows, any standard operating procedures, or whatever you want to call it. How does your team do the stuff that they do really well? How do they do it efficiently? What tricks have they learned? What are the lessons learned? Hopefully you're taking time to document these things during the day. And I know that the best teams I've worked on have done this. And we've used things like, a wiki or intranet or any sort of SharePoint site, anything that's a real-time cloud-based resource that's easy to access if you're working remotely or at a client site or wherever, and make sure you update those because those end up becoming your training documents. They help you with succession planning, all those good things. So that's tip number 6. All right, my last tip today, this one's a hard sell, so hear me out, but this is a tricky one to make sexy. You want to embrace regular audits. And by that, I mean, you want to build in the process into your team to make it easy to satisfy those people who love schedules and databases and worksheets and those kinds of things. So here are a couple ways to do it. You want to adopt continuous practices, and it's up to your team if you do it every week, every month, every quarter, or maybe just once a year. But there are definitely some things that all teams need to look into and maintain as part of their LMS admin. So for example, I liked to sprinkle them into staff meetings, or if you have a monthly check-in with your team, you can schedule those in advance and make sure you have like a standing agenda item. I also like to invite team members to bring different use cases to those meetings, and we could discuss those together. But it's extremely important to get your LMS admins team's consent. So we talk a lot about consent in the world today, and it's the same with your admin team. Make sure you're always checking in, like, hey, do we agree on this? Does this make sense? Is this the best way to spend our time? Is there a rationale or purpose behind it? And together make those democratic decisions. So it could be as simple as like, hey, is our naming convention working? Or how good are we at maintaining or backing up or storing our data? Where do we do it? How often should we do it? So that's the last step. It's probably the hardest one to embrace, but so important to keep that chemistry going and that LMS sexiness. So I'm going to do one more quick poll. I think we've got time for that. So Erin's going to launch that for you. This one's a little tricky. I'm going to have to explain it. All right. So one thing I found that helps with LMS administrations is you need like a team slogan or a team mantra. And some of them can be, kind of standard. I'm not sure if I can see them from where I'm sitting, but Erin's just, oh, here they are. Okay, sorry about that. I've got too many screens open. So the first one's pretty typical. We've all heard of garbage in, garbage out. That's a very sound principle with database management or any systems design. It's only going to be as good and accurate as the information you put into it, right? Number two, I have to explain a bit. We know the song Drop It Like It's Hot. So that could mean two things. One is don't do something if it doesn't make sense, or if it's a time suck, or if it has no value for your business. Just drop it like it's hot, like it's burning you. Or it could mean sort of on the sexier end of things, like maybe you want to get down and get into it because your team sees it as an important priority. So I see we've got, that one's going up, 22% now. Okay. Number three is obviously the Marie Kondo phrase, does it spark joy? I think that's really smart because it helps your team be lean and mean with any process. Like some people get kind of caught up in the maintenance of a system, and yes, it's important, but always have to ask yourself, like, is this really necessary? Is this purposeful? So having does it spark joy as a mantra for your group is a good one. And number four is just for fun. You've lost that loving feeling. I've been with lots of client groups and organizations that had an LMS and they just didn't like it anymore, and nobody wanted to touch it, and they just lost that loving feeling. So if you're in that case, it could be time to migrate, or maybe bring in a consultant or a group like Lambda to sort of refresh and bring your sexy back. Or maybe you have another one, and I've asked you to add it into the chat. So I don't know if there's any fun ones to share, but thanks for adding those. I'm not sure if everyone can see them, but I'm curious to know what you've added. So anyway, my tip for you is make sure you have a team slogan or mantra, and that can really help inform your work and the type of work you take on, but also how you resource those tasks. Great. So I'm going to just leave you with a couple more things, sort of my gift to you, but something we talk about a lot on regular LMS check-ins in the groups that I work in are things like, they seem simple, but things like naming conventions. So here I have a little cartoon just to remind us that, it can be whatever you think it should be, but it has to make sense. It has to be pleasurable to your team. How satisfied are you with how you're doing things, where you're saving them? So that's one example that you might want to bring up as a discussion and get your sexy back. Are people jazzed about these naming conventions? Because if they are, they're going to follow them more consistently. Another way to get people excited about the LMS is to talk about cleanliness, because clean data is sexy data. At least in my world it is. So plan ahead. just like with long-term relationships, it's hard to be spontaneous. It's hard to be excited about things. So if you've had an LMS for a while, if you've been working with the same team members, you can spice things up a little bit by, planning some internal auditing. Maybe you want to do that every quarter. You want to do like an LMS exploration where you poke around in there and see what you can find, and then have a team incentivized, you know, party or something like that. So there's lots of ideas like this to work with your team, build efficiency and competency in LMS administration. And this is my gift to you today. I'm going to leave you with the handout. You can take it away, work through it like a worksheet with your staff, maybe at a staff meeting, or if you're an only LMS administrator, ask yourself these questions and maybe use it for your own workflow. But these will give you some tips to sort of spiff things up and get yourself all sexy again. So I'd love to continue the conversation. I love connecting with people on LinkedIn. You can find me on Twitter at Madame Leah Chang. I used to teach French, and actually my nickname was Madame Sexier because, when you're teaching high school students, sometimes you have to use those analogies that capture their attention. So let's just say my French class was very culturally exciting. And you can also check me out on the website, leahchang.ca. Great. So we have some time for questions, I think. I don't know if any have come in on the chat. We'll just take a quick look here. I'm kind of curious about the other.
Yeah, so we had a comment and then also an other. So I just wanted to share the comment because I thought it was kind of interesting. So Blair said, I'm actually surprised to see learner support included in the admin task, sort of up at the beginning. I know that was my first experience as a Moodle administrator, that I kind of did every single thing possible because we had a small team and also kind of a small audience set. So we were able to do that. But Leah, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it really depends on the nature of your organization and how you're using the LMS and for what. So, for example, in a corporate learning situation, it's very typical for a small company of, let's say, 300 employees for the learning person or instructional design person to also do support for learners. So if learners have some sort of issue with the system, they don't call IT or the support desk, they call you. And so that was quite typical in a lot of the teams I worked on. I don't know if that's a very successful model, but again, it has to do with clarifying who does what. And hey, check in, get that consent. If you have suggestions like, hey, I think the IT team should take these types of tickets on, then have that discussion with them, and you might be more successful that way. But good question. Yeah, good point. Did we have any other?
So there was in the mantra section, Bob has shared his other, which is LMS equals lousy manual system. So I'm guessing that maybe there's a lot of work there, or maybe not enough training or information. So Leah, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, thank you for adding that, and I feel your pain. We've all been part of those systems that either were implemented before we arrived, or we didn't have any say in the matter, and we're now just maintaining it, and nobody has any joy in those moments. So what I'd recommend is get to know your system, first of all. Maybe talk to your organization and say, hey, do we have the right system? If you're not excited about it, if you're not getting the support you need from your vendor, I'm going to guess it's not the greatest fit. And that's very typical. People migrate to different systems constantly. I think the statistics are like 3 out of 5. Don't quote me on that. I'd have to do a bit more research. But every 5 years, it's very common for companies to migrate. And that's why you want to work with a group, for example, like Lambda, who's really going to support you in that. And like Erin said, it might be a training issue. Not necessarily you might know what you're doing, but educating the groups around you on how much work it involves. We talked about LMS work being time consuming. Some of the most frustrating positions I've been in have been where people didn't recognize that that was important work to do, and we didn't have the time allocated for that. So anyway, hang in there. maybe choose a different mantra and stick with that, and try to surround yourself with people who will champion your LMS. But good luck to you. Great. These are some fun comments.
Yeah, we actually have a couple more. So thanks everyone for putting any questions. So here's another new question I think is worth maybe squeezing in. I know we're right at the bottom of the hour, but I think it's worth putting out there. So Peter has shared, we have no dedicated training department. So LMS is time shared amongst several people. I think this is a really common situation. Any advice on how to optimize this scenario? Thanks, Peter.
Oh, that's a good one, Peter. I have been part of cross-departmental or combo hybrid teams where they administer the LMS together. Those are the most challenging. Like Erin says, they're probably the most common. Sometimes it's healthy. For example, I love working with marketing. They get that stuff. They know how to work with systems. They are really creative at troubleshooting, and they can do all sorts of fun stuff like videos, branding, that kind of thing. So try to embrace that, but I really advise you to have an LMS administration. I guess you could call it a team charter. You want to make sure that, are you all on the right page? Do you know what your roles are? Map that out. Have a mantra for your team, and maybe you need to pick or designate a champion. Like who is the owner of the LMS? Who can make the final decision when, let's say, you're not always in agreement? Because that's going to happen, right? So that could be HR, that could be product management. I don't know, whatever your organization's model is, you definitely want to make sure you've designated a clear owner and mapped out what does everybody do and who's good at what, who gets jazzed about certain things. So again, going back to that consent piece, work together and try to democratically sort of charter, like, where do we want to go with this and how do we want to distribute our roles. But yeah, you're not alone. We've been there a lot.
All right, we've got a couple more, but I think, can we squeeze in one more question? Okay, you guys are asking really great questions. And there's a couple we'll get to offline, so if we don't get yours, we'll do it, but we'll do one more question. I think this is a good one. So do you suggest that an LMS admin must have a pedagogical background as well? Really nice question, Sam. Leah, what do you think?
Ooh, I like the question. I'm going to answer with it depends. I don't think so. You definitely don't need to have pedagogy or andragogy, I think is what we call adult learning. However, working with instructional designers can be very beneficial. So I'll give you an example. I learned how to manage learning management systems kind of the opposite way. I came into it through the lens of education. And because of that, I know how I might want to use some of the functionality. For example, I know what works with adult learners. I know how to space out or chunk out the learning. I have that sort of those principles behind me. Someone who's mostly systems based or development based, which is great too, they might have a very different lens, and they may not always know the beneficial sort of neuroscience behind why we do things a certain way. So my short answer is work together. You definitely want to have developers or systems people, and you want to have instructional designers. That just makes you stronger.
Amazing. All right. Aaliyah, thank you so very much. And thanks everybody for your amazing questions. Like I said, there's a few more on the board. Leah and I will get to those offline because I think they're also really great questions and worth answering. But we're out of time. We're a little bit over time. So we're just going to close up. We've got a couple sessions coming up. So Leah's just going to give us the next slide, I think, here. So today, what we're starting is a month of sessions that we usually try and tie them together. And so today we're looking at that overall look at how to make administration happen. We're going to follow that up with 2 labs, as we usually do. The first one, using the files data source, is a focus on how to manage your files, so tracking and managing your files through Zula Analytics. So you can take a look at a report and see what's happening on your system. And then we're following that directly with our LMS focus lab, and then looking at how to manage your files, your storage, backups, and archiving through the LMS itself. These are really important. All of the points that Leah said today, I have experienced either as in my current role, helping people manage and implement their systems, as well as a Moodle administrator before my life at Lambda Solutions. So I think it's really good. If you are an administrator, please sign up for these sessions. The links are on the slides, as well as they will be sent to you through the follow-up. And then starting in October, I think it kind of fits in with this theme, is getting new admins up to speed. So as Leah had mentioned, that quite often there is a bit of a breakup and people move on. Like, that's just the way the world works. And so often I've had to swoop in and assist with a new team, and they're pulling their hair out. So I'd like to put together, half an hour. This is what to do when you have a brand new admin in your system. So show up for our sessions. It would be really great. And if you have any questions on our last slide here, you can just contact us directly. So this is Lambda Solutions. Get a hold of us if you have any questions. And of course, you can email me as well. Thanks everyone for taking a few extra minutes to share with us today and your great questions. We hope to see you again later this month. Have a great day. Bye.